Hello friends, in this lecture we're going to create two more animation states, make the connections and write the rules for them. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and create the jump and fall animation states, create the connections and then write the rules. At any point in this lecture, feel free to take a shot at writing any rule. That is going to be your challenge for this lecture. See if you can figure it out yourself. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and start. So first of all, we're going to create the jump animation state. Let's double click on it. In here, we're going to play Captain jump. We're going to connect it to the output. And for jumping, we're going to select the animation here. And from the details, we're going to turn off looping because we don't want the jump animation to loop. Let's go back into the state machine. And now we're going to create the connection from idle to jump. So let's drag the connection, connect it to the jump. And for the rule, we're going to check if the z velocity of the player is greater than 0. So let's take the captain. Let's get the velocity. Just like that. We're going to split this struct pin and take a look at the z. If this is greater than 0, that means we're going up, and that means we're jumping. So that's going to be the rule. Let's go back, save, compile, and test this. We start in idle. If I jump, I go into the jump animation, as you can see. But of course, we need to be able to go back from jump into idle. So that's going to be the next step. So let's create the connection from jump to idle. And let's write the rule. And of course, you can see and try and see if you want to do this yourself. Let's open it up. And this is going to be checking if the z velocity is equal to 0. So we can actually go back into idle to jump, copy all of this, go into jump to idle, paste it. And instead of checking if it's greater than 0, we'll check if it is equal to 0. Connect it. So the rule to go from jump to idle is the z velocity being 0, because that means we're standing still. We're not in the air or we're not falling. So let's save and compile this, run the game. Now we should be able to jump and then go back into idle. Perfect. The problem is we can't go into jump from running. So that's also something we need to do. So next up, we're going to create the connection from run to jump. Run to jump is going to be the same as idle to jump. So we're simply going to copy and paste this to run to jump because it's the same condition. If you think about it, is the z greater than 0? So let's go back, save and compile and test this. Now we're going to be able to run and go into jump. And as you can see, going from jump to run is also working, even though we didn't create the connection ourselves. That is very good, and that's simply because from run we go into jump, and when we land, we go back to idle, and then immediately we go into run from idle. So that means we don't need to create the connection from jump to run directly, we're simply going through idle to run immediately. Okay, that's all we have to do for jumping. Now we're going to create the animation state for falling. So as a small challenge, see if you can create that animation yourself and then set it up. Okay, let's go ahead and right click, create a new animation state, name it to be fall, open it up. We're going to right click again. In here, we're going to play Captain Fall, connect it to the output, and we're also going to make this not loop. It's a single frame anyways, so there's no point of making this loop, but even if you have loop on, it's not going to be different. So let's go back into the state machine and let's start implementing the connections. So first of all, we want to be able to go from jump to fall. So when the player goes up, it's in the jump, and once it starts falling down, it's going to be in fall. So let's create that connection and write the rule. As always, see if you can do this yourself as well, if you want to. The rule is going to be very simple, actually. We're going to get the captain again, take a look at the velocity, the z velocity, and the z velocity has to be less than 0. Because that means we're going down. If it's greater than 0, that means we're going up. In this case, we were inside of jump. So that means it was greater than 0. And we check if it is less than 0 now. And if it is, that means we're falling and we should switch to the falling animation state. So let's test this. And now, as you can see, we jumped, and when we were falling back down, we switched to fall. But of course, currently we have no way of going into a different animation state from fall. So we should go ahead and create those connections as well. So first of all, we should be able to go from fall into idle. So I'm going to copy and paste what we did here in jump to fall. And then for fall to idle, we're going to check if the z velocity is equal to 0. Because if it's equal to 0, that means we're not in the air. So let's give this a shot. Now we're able to fall and go back into idle. And as you can see, we can also go from falling to run. And just like with jumping to run, we also don't need to create that connection directly from fall to run, because we're going into idle and then going into run immediately. One problem we have here is if we fall from an edge like that, we're not going into the fall state. We're still in run. So we should be able to go from run into fall as well. And that's actually going to be the same as jump to fall. We just need to check if the z velocity is less than 0. So we can simply copy and paste that here. Just like that. And now we should be able to fall off an edge and go into the fall state. Perfect. So that's actually all the states that we have currently in the game that we can test at least. But there's actually 2 more rules that we need to create here. One is going to be going from fall to jump. And that's because we're going to implement a double jump in the future. So we need to be able to fall and jump again in the air. So that's going to be the first. And I'm also going to create the connection and rule for going from idle to fall. Even though that's not really going to happen right now, theoretically it is possible that we go from idle to fall. So why not? Let's create that as well. So to go from fall to jump, we're going to check if the z is greater than 0. So I think we did that here for idle to jump. Let's copy and paste this into fall to jump. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to test this until we implement double jumping. And then we have idle to fall, which is going to be the z velocity being less than 0. And that is going to be the same, I think, as jump to fall. Let's copy and paste this to idle to fall. Just like that. Awesome. So that's basically going to cover all of the connections and rules we want to write in this lecture. Of course, we're going to have 2 more animation states for taking hits and dying, but we're going to create them later in the course. For now, this is going to be enough. Let's give this a shot. And we should be able to start in idle, jump, go into fall, go back into idle. And we should also be able to do those same things in running. So we run, jump, fall, go back into run, just like that. And we should also be able to go from running to fall. And theoretically, we can also go from idle to fall, but we can't really test that here. We can also go from from falling to jumping again. But like I said, we can't also test that, unfortunately. But that's okay. We have all the things that we want at the moment working perfectly. Great. So we can go ahead and do a small recap. I don't want to go through each rule again. You can take a look at them. They should also make, intuitive sense. We're simply checking, for example, if we're jumping, is the z velocity less than 0, then go into fall. So it's all logical. It all makes sense. Hopefully all of these connections are making sense as well. Imagine doing all of this in code. It's going to be really complicated and you're not going to have any of this, visual stuff. So it's going to be all in text. PaperZD is really making this easy for us, which I'm very grateful for. So as a recap, we created 2 more animation states, jump and fall. We created all the connections across these states that we need, and we also wrote all of the rules.